What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to Lockdown Universe, home of the bizarre, peculiar, and unheard of stories of UFO legend and paranormal lore. Welcome back, welcome back. Happy to be back. Hopefully, you guys are doing awesome and taking care of yourself. So, today we got an awesome one for you. We got a story about a man who has his own personal alien friends and can communicate with them at will, or at least could. He's passed since. Could communicate with them at will given a device, and what they said and why they were interested in him specifically. So, we're going to get into a really interesting story coming off Gaia.com. It's told by Richard Doty, and it's about a man named Les Ramey who lived in Rachel, Nevada. We all know Rachel, Nevada, right? Rachel, Nevada is right outside of Area 51, right? So that's the best part. So so this story talks about Les Ramey and how he was involved with aliens and UFOs for basically most of his life. He was in the United States Army, so he does have military history. He did have some high classifications for security clearances, and that's where we have this story begin. So after he gets out of the military, he's out of the military for about 8 years, and he decides that he's going to get out of the Air Force. He's going to live in Nevada. So basically, he buys a trailer. Okay, he lives in Rachel, Nevada. He applies for a job. This is after the military. Applies for a job to take care of this mine that's in Rachel, Nevada. It's called the Lincoln Mine, and he basically just lives in a trailer. And he works in this mine. And it's an easy job because all he has to do is basically watch over the mine. Interestingly enough, almost seems kind of too good to be true, right? But in 1972, what came out to be too good to be true came out to be even better. On a summer walk, he starts to walk outside the perimeter of the Nellis Air Force Base, the test range there. And as he got closer, he saw basically a bright light coming in, and it was moving towards him. And he said, "Well, let me check this thing out." It did land close to him, and it was a flying saucer, he says. And the saucer just lands right by him. Luckily enough, almost as if he was chosen, right? Who wouldn't want to be chosen by an aircraft back in the day, alien aircraft back in the day? This thing kind of has it says a flying saucer, but in the video, it kind of looks like a cigar shaped almost. But a door opens in this aircraft, and these two robotic hovering beings come out. So they look like robots. They're hovering over the ground, and they come out of the spacecraft and they talk to him, and they basically say, "Hey, we want you to come with us." And he's like, "What the hell? What's going on here?" But they have a big helmet on. They have like a spacesuit. They're all in silver, and he felt like something was pulling him towards the spacecraft, like a field of energy or something, and something's pulling him towards the spacecraft. And he said that he got to the door, he went inside, and he felt basically calm the entire time. He didn't feel like somebody's going to attack him or anything like that. And they put him down in this nice large seat, and while they asked him to sit down in this nice large seat, he could hear them speaking to them telepathically. And so, a little confusing, right? When they start talking to you and you're like, "Whoa, what the hell's going on here?" But he got the idea, and he sat down, and he realizes, "Oh man, they're going to take me somewhere." So he tried to get up, but then he couldn't get up. He stuck basically to this chair, and this ball comes around him, like a ball that like encompasses him. And he gets a little bit dizzy, and then he just wakes up, and he's like outside, and it's like a barren landscape, kind of like a desert, but there's all these like half circle huts that he sees. They look like they're made of like clay or mud. And then all of a sudden, he sees this like 5 foot humanoid looking at him, and it starts to talk to him. And this alien is showing him that these are our huts. These are what we live in. And he's like, "What the?" Kind of like basically like Star Wars. Like the mud, like the huts like that are in Star Wars, are very, very Star Wars esque. But he said that the creature was about 5 foot, and suddenly this creature started to talk to him in English. It wasn't great English though, so keep that in mind. But he sensed that it was a female. The female was starting to give him some information and basically saying that here is where we live. Here are our spacecraft or our craft that hovers. And she was very polite and showed him around and said, this is how we live," trying to get him to understand them and their society. But he was like immediately freaked out and like was like, "I got to get back. I got to get back. I got to get back to Earth." And they were like, "Okay, all right, fine." So they get him back in the seat. They make him pass out with the ball, and they bring him back, and he woke up back on Earth, right in Rachel, Nevada, right where he left. So they were beginning the start of this conversation, beginning the start of this friendship, and he was he was totally aghast. He had a girlfriend. He is living in a trailer. He's like, "I don't know what the hell I'm supposed to do." So so this is 1972. Keep in mind, I mean, this is a long time ago, and the abductions lasted for about 7 years, and they continued. So a few months later, he had what he felt like was some sort of like calling, basically bringing him back to that same location where he got abducted, that same location exactly. And the craft came and it landed, and he jumped on board, and they take him back to the planet, and he meets with this female entity again. And the first thing he did is, he wanted to ask her, he's like, "What's your name?" And so she gave him a name. She said, "You won't understand, so I'll just call myself Kim." She calls herself Kim, and that way he can easily understand. And he said, "Okay, well, I want to know where we're at now." And he's like, "What planet are we on? Where the hell are we?" And she said, "Well, you're not going to really understand, but you know." She basically says we're not on Earth. And it gets a lot better. It gets a lot better. So this time he was taken to a huge building, nice and large. It didn't seem to have any floor. It was almost as if he was floating. He couldn't really understand any of this, but he looked around, and it was a huge, humongous building, and little creatures were doing things all throughout the building, busy building something or working on something. These were entities. These were not the robots. These were entities working on something. They had a large head. They were about 5 foot tall, like we talked about, just like Kim. 2 arms, 2 legs, bipedal. And they did have 5 fingers, which is interesting because a lot of these aliens don't have 5 fingers. They have like 3 or 4 or something like that. Um, and other than her head or face, he basically just had to identify her through the telecommunication. But he felt like that she was somewhat human. I'm sorry, telepathic, not telecommunication. But he was super excited this time. So he stayed there for a little bit of time. He was learning things. They were telling him, about their planet and their society. And next time, when he got back to the Earth, he realized a lot of time was missing this time. The first time he really didn't know how much because he wasn't there that long. But this time, a lot of time was missing. Not like 5 years like the other, the other guy. Um, but it was a few days. So when he came back the second time and he looked at his watch and realized that he'd been gone for 8 hours. Okay, so he couldn't understand it. Obviously, if you go to another planet, time's gonna be missing. You're doing something, but it didn't seem like it was 8 hours because the time that he was there was not 8 hours. But of course, you got travel time, right? Got to take into consideration that commute, baby, right? So now he's like kind of worried. Now he's like, shit, should I talk to somebody? Should I, what should I do? Should I talk to one of the other caretakers of the mine? Should I talk to my girlfriend? She's going to think I'm crazy. So he didn't talk to her at all. He didn't talk to most people. But this is where it gets interesting because the aliens actually give him a device to communicate with them whenever they want, whenever he wants. It's like this golden rod. And they give him the golden rod, and they're like, whenever you need to communicate with us, let us know. Because he could always communicate with them by taking a walk, and and get this feeling like he was gonna meet them. But now they were going to use this device so that when he needed something, he didn't have to be called by them. He could communicate with them through this device. It was almost like a microphone. Not that it looked like a microphone, but he felt like it communicated like a microphone. He could talk into it, and they would get the understanding of it. Now, some other weird things happened too. Other people were starting to notice that he was disappearing. So you go on these walks, and there were some people that were out in the desert that did see him kind of basically, disappear, or he'd be walking down the hill, and all of a sudden he's gone, and then like 8 hours later, he would reappear again. Not that he was, disappearing into thin air, but that like he'd go over a hill, they couldn't see him, and then like 8 hours later he'd be walking back, and they're like, "Holy shit! What, you've been walking for 8 hours?" So they, because there wasn't a whole lot of people out there. Who was he visiting? Who was he engaging with? So on the next go around, Kim takes him back, and he goes back up the ship, and now there's men. Now there's men aliens there that are want to question him. They want to talk to him. They want to say, "What did you do in the Air Force?" Remember our last podcast we were talking about that? They were talking about a guy that got abducted for 5 years, and they were like, "What?" He was actually a nuclear engineer, and Les was also a nuclear engineer in the Air Force too. Isn't that interesting? But he was out of the Air Force for like 8 years at that point, 7 or 8 years. So isn't it interesting that these guys knew that this guy was an engineer, and they wanted to talk to him, and they said, "Hey, what are you guys making? What are these weapons? What are these tin canisters, or metal canisters that cause so much destruction?" And Les is like, "You guys don't have these? You guys don't have these kinds of weapons?" They're like, "No, no, we don't. We want to learn about them. You got to, we want to find out about them." And so, he's like, "Why are they asking these questions? Why are they concerned about the nuclear weapons?" And he asks him that. He's like, "Why are you so concerned about the nukes? I mean, they're just weapons." And and they're like, "We want to know what they do. Why we see you use them? Why are you using them?" It's almost like they can't even understand war at this point. They're like they're so peaceful that they don't understand the fact that we're at war with each other, and we have to have these to kind of keep our political dominance over the world, right? But they were very, very concerned about this. And we know that aliens have been concerned about nuclear weapons for quite some time. They've been blocking them. They've been doing all kinds of things. But Les was just a technician. He didn't build them. He maintained them. So he's doing like the cleaning. He's doing adjustments on them. But building one from scratch. I mean, he's not going to be able to do that. So he tells him about these things, but he also feels like he betrayed his country. So before he got off the spaceship this time, he was talking to Kim, and Kim came back with him on the craft, and he has this tube. Okay, again, we're talking about that same tube. It's like a wand. They described it, and it had like some alien symbols on it, kind of like how Jim Peniston had drawn some of those squares with a line coming out with like triangles, being a basic geometry type stuff. But it was on this wand, and he thought it was odd that they gave it to him, and they were talking more about it. But basically, they wanted to stay in contact with him. Interesting, because we didn't hear about that from any of these other abductees. But basically, he went home. He hid this thing. He put it in his refrigerator so that nobody'd be looking for it. Because who the hell, if you're going to steal stuff in somebody's house, you're not going to be looking in the refrigerator, are you? You're not going to be stealing food. So he's back to work at the mine, but they closed it down. And so he's got this time on his hands now, after a few months. And one day he's driving down. Let's make sure I get this right, because I don't want to get it wrong. Um, he's driving down was it something Creek, Corn Creek Road. He's driving down Corn Creek Road, and apparently this is like a well-researched road. It's like one around the entrances of Area 51. Yeah, and here's a picture of it that they got up here. So it's on the far eastern perimeter of the Nellis Test Force Base and testing range. So they got nukes out there. They got weapons, and they got ships and all kinds of stuff out there. But he's driving down this road, and then he sees a craft coming down again. As he's driving, he didn't call for it with his wand or anything. He didn't get up thinking that he had a calling, and it wasn't Kim this time. It was another entity. Okay, the other entity was about the same size, and it looked like Kim, but it wasn't Kim. He thought it was Kim, identified himself to Kim, and he said it was not her. He said it was some other extraterrestrial. And this extraterrestrial says, we want you to come back to our planet and live. That's wild. We want you to help us. Could you imagine? And this is in 1979, 7 years after his first contact. He, now, he's like, no. He's like, no, now I'm engaged to a woman. I'm planning my marriage. He's like, I'm not going to do that. And this is around April in the early spring. And he's like, no, I have a life. He's like, I'm not going to leave. And they say, yes, you have to come with us. Like they're kind of starting to get pissed at this point. They're getting very forceful. So he jumps in his car and he drives away. And he's like worried that they're coming after him. And he basically gets back home, which is still in Rachel, Nevada, and he's terrified. He's like, "What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?" So he calls the authorities. Oh my God, worst decision in the world, right? Don't call the authorities. So he wakes up one morning to go to work, and guess who's at the front door? The the government. They got an OSI agent out there. They got an FBI agent out there, and they say, "We know you have something. We know you have a device. You need to turn it over." And he's like, "What are you talking about? I don't have anything. What are you talking about?" And they're like, "We know somebody who knows the person that gave it to you, and if you don't turn it over, they will come after you. Basically, the aliens will come after you." Now, he already said, he called him and he told him the story. He said, "These guys want to take me with them, right?" So they know already. They know that he's terrified, and they know that if they don't give him the device, they can manipulate him by saying these guys are going to come back for you, which actually might not be a lie. That could, I mean, that obviously they could track their own device, right? So he does give it up because he's freaked out. He's like, these guys want to take me away from Earth forever. So he gives it up. Gives it up. He's super paranoid. He thinks there's people, with cameras on him all the time and this and that. But basically, he gives it up. And he's thinking to himself, should I have done that? Should I have done that? I don't know. Da 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 da. Well, the aliens now later on they come back again. They don't. He doesn't use the wand. They do a calling, and Kim shows him and gives him a piece of paper or some material with a design on it, and she says, "This is you." And he's looking at it, and this is 79, and he's like, "What the heck is this? I don't understand this." He's looking at it, and then years later, he still has this document that she gave to him. And years later, as science continues to progress, we find out that we can understand DNA, and DNA has the A, T, C, G sections of the genetic code. And he goes back to look at it because he sees these images of DNA on the news now, and he's looking at his picture. He's like, "This is my DNA. This is DNA. This is what they're showing on the TV, but this must be my DNA strand specifically." And the aliens must have been interested not only in his DNA but also in him, in the fact that he was a previous nuclear technician as well. So now he's thinking, you know what? I let me go talk to the government again. Let me go see if I can't get my device back that I gave to them. I feel bad that I gave it over. And he did some research, and he went to some different colleges. He learned about viruses and bacteria and the DNA. He just wanted to get more knowledge on it because obviously the aliens were interested in his DNA, and he brought it to different doctors to show them what was on his document, even though he didn't give it to him, but he took it back home. But he basically said, maybe I should try to figure this out. And what he understood was that these aliens were creating us. These aliens were creating us. They were manipulating DNA. They know about DNA. They can manipulate things the way they want to, and and I want to learn more. So what does he do? So the last contact was on the Corn Creek Road, right, where the craft like almost drove him off the road, and they wanted take him with him. So this is months later now, and he sat one night in his trailer, and for the first time ever, he tells his fiance, kind of what's going on. 7 years of contact with these extraterrestrials. So it sits her down, tells her the whole story, and she's like, "What the hell?" And she packs her bags up and she leaves him. She leaves him. No marriage, no nothing. So she like basically just annihilates him, and he can't tell his story anymore because he's going to lose all of his family. So he started to go to like UFO conventions in the late 90s. This is years, this is like a decade and a half later. But he wanted to meet and talk to people that had similar experiences to him. And remember, this is like pre internet stuff. Internet didn't get big till the mid 90s where you could start to talk to people in chat rooms and shit, but it wasn't great. So he went to these conferences and he met another experiencer, and then eventually he hooked up with this other experiencer, and they got married. They got married, and he was happy. But what about the story about him, like wanting to get his wand back? Because I think that that's an interesting part of the story. So he speaks to an OSI, uh, Office of Special Investigations individual. It says, "Hey man, you guys got my stuff. I want something. I want it back." And this Office of Special Investigations guy's like, "I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Let me run it up the chain and see what I can find out." And he didn't know, so they run it up the chain, and they call him like weeks later, and they're like, "We want you to come in and talk to one of our agents." And it was a female agent that Doty knew at the time, and he came into the office and he tells her his story, and he's like, "I'd like to have that wand back." And she tells him, she's like very forceful and authoritative. She's like, "Do you think we can actually give that back to you?" She's like, "That's not from here, right?" She's like, "That we can't give that back to you. If we get that back to you, then they know how to find you again, and you don't want that, believe me." And she said, "I suggest you get up and forget that you ever were here, and and don't come back." And that's what she told him. And he basically followed her orders, and he didn't think about the fact that maybe this thing could not only call, not not only could this thing be allowed to allow him to call them, but that it could be a tracking device. So he was like, "Oh shit, maybe that is a problem." Um, but he never had any more contact after they tried to abduct him, and it was a different person other than Kim coming down. Almost like they made another person, like maybe she passed away, and they knew that he had this good conversation and rapport built with Kim, so they made like a replica, but he knew it wasn't quite her, and they weren't as nice as Kim. And maybe Kim was related to him through genetics somehow, and maybe she was just nicer to him than the rest of them. But basically, they were really forceful, and they were like, "You got to come live with us." Da 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 da. He's like, "Hell no." Versus if they would have said, "Hey, we want you to come back for a little bit. We want to talk to you about a couple of things and show you a couple of things, and go from there." Versus, "You need to come live with us now." And like, come on. Who, what individual in their right mind is from any planet is gonna be like, "Oh, okay, sure. You want me to go live somewhere, that I have zero experience in and don't know anything about, and I don't know how long I'll live. I don't know how to connect with anyone up there. I don't. It's not like you got a human, for me to marry up there, do you? It's like, things like that. We need connection. We need love. We need understanding. We need to be able to talk to people that are, on the same level." Um, but I found this story really fascinating because it's not one I've ever heard of, and Doty's starting to come out with these really interesting stories because they may be declassified, but they might be buried in underneath black black tape, red tape, underneath black marker, redacted documents that you can't read because I don't want you to read them. So fascinating story. I wanted to share it with you guys. So Les Raimi, the man who could command his own little alien army and command his own alien taxi. So wouldn't that be fascinating? That'd be a great idea to have a movie about, I think. Just thinking out loud. So what do you think? Do you think that would be cool? Do you think you'd go live on another planet if they wanted you to? Knowing you might not come back. Um, After the first experience, would you continue to have communication with these guys? It seems like they treated him pretty well. They brought him back. They didn't injure him. So it seems like these guys, were trying to be friendly. Of course, they were trying to gain information about the nuclear program, but they didn't put his head into some sort of, device like they did the other guy. They didn't injure him. They didn't, do a lot of things that they could have done, to gather
Europa,
information.
probably because
So,
there's so much
sorry. So, I think that there's a lot to be learned here, and we don't know which alien species this is because there's so many species out there that sound similar, right? I mean, they weren't the short grays. The short grays were like 3.5, 4 feet tall. These guys were like 5 feet tall. So where were they at? They basically told him you won't understand, you won't know. So they didn't tell him. So he doesn't know which star system he was in or anything. Very fascinating story. So that's what I got for you this episode. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you can think about it. I think, like I said, I think it'd be a great movie. Command your own little alien taxi to go up to an alien base for a while. Go talk to some other people. Apparently give up some secrets that I'm sure some government agencies did not want to let out of their grasp, but nonetheless happened anyway. So fascinating stuff. Very, very fascinating stuff. So take care of yourselves, guys, physically, spiritually, emotionally. If you're ever going through anything that you don't understand or need more information on, contact a professional. We used to have Dr. Mac to talk to, and would be sent in for some of these things, but he's not with us anymore, unfortunately. Probably sabotaged and when he was hit with that car. But anyway, I love you guys. Take care of yourselves physically, spiritually, emotionally. Follow through on your hobbies and your goals and your dreams. And as always, continue to question the universe around you. Until next time, guys, take care. Please like, follow, share, subscribe. Locked On Universe out. Peace.